I just feel like we fit in here.
Make them laugh, make them cry, or poke them in the eye.
Everywhere I go, somebody wants to tell me, you should have restyled the Mustang differently, or, I love that.
Why not a black woman to lead the poetry advocacy of Michigan?
Even my mom gets mad when we lose, but it's been pretty good marriage.
Hi, I'm Christy McDonald, and thanks so much for joining me for A Conversation With. It's our streaming series here on Local 4, where we sit down with some of the most interesting people around and go beyond the first two questions. Since they're all exclusively on our streaming channel, Local 4 Plus, we thought we'd give you some of our favorite conversations right here. Starting with Kelly Stafford. She is a podcaster. She's the wife of former Lions quarterback Matthew Stafford. She still holds a lot of love for Detroit and is known for telling it like it is. But she made national news for maybe getting a little too revealing about Matthew and his team. I talked with her just days later about being a lightning rod for criticism. What is it about when you do come back here and the connection and the conversations that you're still having with people?
Well, I think I grew up here. I moved here when I was 19. I left everything behind that I knew. I had 4 kids here. I had a brain surgery here. We had a lot of ups and downs, and it's home in a way. And when I come back here, that comes flooding in a way that's hard to explain. And seeing people walking around, and when they're like just saying hello, it's never feels like it's fake, or it's just very, again, just genuine. And that's what I love about this place.
I think it's so interesting what you said, though, about you grew up here and the highs and lows that you did have. But I think that's also something about you that people gravitate towards, is because you have been absolutely transparent, real, and authentic about all of that. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And you've also taken some garbage for it as well.
I have. And, sometimes I regret how much I share and how real I can be sometimes, because, I'm sure as being in the media and people knowing you and all these things, sometimes that can backfire on you.
What you said on your podcast about Matthew and him bonding, or maybe not bonding so much with the younger players on the team. Let me ask, is that ever a conversation then when you come home and he's like, "Hun"?
Oh, that was the worst thing I've probably done when it comes to with him. I spoke on a topic that I think it's relatable to the fact that it's hard to relate to someone who is 10 years younger than you.
And that's what was written actually about it. It was a very relatable thing. And I do think that's entirely true, but I'm not in an NFL locker room. I'm not spending every day with these teammates. Obviously there's relationships. He spends more time with them than he does with me during the season. That was tough. I say all the time, even on my podcast, probably not the best if your wife's name's in the media when it comes to, if it's talking about sports. And I failed pretty bad last week, but we're going to move forward. Hopefully those guys, and I know those guys know Matthew and don't read into it, because as we know, media can stir things up, but I put my foot in my mouth pretty good last week. So, but I love that you're very honest, though, about the relationship between you and Matthew. I'm like, all right, we have to talk this out, or we're going to yell this thing out, or then we're going to learn from it and move forward. And the importance of that and that kind of communication, and the reality of we all deal with that in our relationships.
Yeah, marriages aren't perfect. Our marriage is not perfect. We work on it every day. We learn things about each other a lot. We have 4 kids who are teaching us even more about our marriage. It's something that I think we welcome. I think it makes us stronger in the end. Now, are those times hard? Yeah, they are. But I do truly think that if it's important enough, and it is, because if your marriage is good, then you can be good parents.
And you can catch Kelly on the Morning After podcast. Her co-host, Hank Winchester. They're super fun together. And in my full interview, Kelly talks about parenting and adjusting to life in LA. All right, speaking about super fun, the Mojo in the Morning show has been a staple here in Detroit for years on Channel 955. I've known Mojo for a long time being in this business, and it never ceases to amaze me how he brings his personal life to the radio. It sometimes gets kind of cringy. I wondered about the cost of it all on his family and his marriage. And in true form, he opened up again.
This thing right here has changed the game for everybody.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I've realized, I got to see which that's my wife's screen skater. That's my wife on the screen skater right there. But this has made it that you don't need to sit in your car to listen to a radio show anymore. If we aren't entertaining in the first couple of minutes of bringing it up, we got to move on to something else.
You know, entertaining, but also real. And that's what I think is so interesting about you. And I've listened to you for the entire time that you've been on here in Detroit.
Filled in before on the show.
Filled in, exactly. I've filled in on the show. And I always think it's amazing how much of your personal life that you bring in that ends up being entertainment. And I was wondering about how that has evolved.
We're all relatable people. We all have our quirks. We all have our pains.
We all have our messy, let's be honest. We all have our messy.
And honestly, if my philosophy has been that I will try to be as personal with the listeners as possible in hopes that they'll be personal back. And the one thing that I've learned over the years is there's always a time and place for when you talk about it. There sometimes is not the greatest idea to bring up, you know, the night before that you and your wife were in a screaming match, and there's not the time to sit there in the midst of the storm where, you know, my wife and I have gone through counseling so many times. I won't get into stuff on the air while I'm in the middle of it because I don't want this radio show to be the reason why I, you know, fail at my marriage or my wife and I decide that we're going to go our separate ways. And we've almost had a couple of moments where we have went our separate ways. And when I brought that up on the air and shared it, it's been the thing that I think grabs the listeners the most because they're struggling too. And if it at all helps them get through it, or maybe helps them understand why they didn't get through it.
God, that's raw.
It's tough. I will say this, she's extremely understanding about what I talk about. And there are times where I've learned as I've gotten older how dumb I was when I was younger to risk, you know, confidentiality of my family by bringing it up on the radio. It's
a really, really fine line because you have this audience and you come, and I think people can smell when you are not being authentic.
One of the things as the time has gone by being on the air, that is the greatest compliment that people can ever give is I listened to you guys because I knew it would make me feel better. I knew it would make me, you know, be comforted. I knew I would get the, you know, you guys talking about it. You know, the fact that people know that we'll talk about things like that. That's honestly the greatest pride that I've had in all the years of doing this.
When we look forward into how we're consuming media, how we're listening to radio, what do you think's in store for the next 5 years when you think about it? Because you were nominated to be in the Radio Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I didn't win. I might win this year, who knows? I want to do it for as long as I possibly can because I have zero hobbies. I'm a horrible golfer. And I will end up divorced if I stay home because my wife will be...
She's like, out of my space.
I take a week's vacation and she's like, don't you have like people you can go hang out with, you know, so...
And of course, you can listen to Mojo every morning on Channel 955. And since our conversation, he and his wife have started a podcast called We Don't, talking about relationships. And in our full conversation, he talks about his sons, and that's when he breaks down into tears. So you can check out the full interview streaming on Local 4+. All right, moving away from relationships to cars. I've had the opportunity to moderate a lot of conversation with CEOs, and there is a fine line between just talking business and then getting a little more personal. Well, Ford Chairman Bill Ford Jr. was revealing in our conversation about EVs, speeding tickets, and what keeps him up at night.
Certainly electrification is happening and is by historical standards very quickly. I do think, though, you know, I never thought I would see the day where our products have gotten politicized. But there is this notion now that if you are red, you're for internal combustion. If you're blue, you're for EVs. In our wildest dreams, we never thought we would see our products somehow be politicized. But like everything else in this country now, things, you know, even our products are getting politicized. And, you know, and so that will change the rate of adoption also.
Let's talk about moving into EVs, and there are people that are driving them now who love them very much. But to move to that point where we are going to be fully electric and taking a look at the price infrastructure, and people are not quite sure.
Yeah, and they're not. And the great thing about us is we've sort of positioned our company that we can go whichever way it breaks. I believe that optionality for us is the way to go because one size doesn't fit all. Some people, really do want EVs. Other people are saying, over my dead body, I'll never drive one of those things. That's fine. I mean, nobody's forcing anybody into anything. And yet we are placing our bets that the EV future will come.
You also did grab brands, though, that had fierce loyalty. And you were able to, and then when you put a Mustang out there, you weren't too pleased about that at first, right?
No, I was the last one to say yes to that inside Ford because to me, a Mustang had to be a V8 with a stick and the idea.
And the top down.
Yeah, and the top down. And the idea of actually having an EV that made no noise at all. Are you kidding? But until I drove it, and then I drove it, I thought, oh my God. This is actually amazing.
They kept coming back to you, though,
They
right?
did, but they didn't have a drivable prototype, so I was unmoved. But, but when they finally got one, I thought, wow, this thing's a blast. It snaps your head back at,
within the speed limit,
I shouldn't be talking about this.
Never speeds, right?
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, it drives my family crazy because I always say, well, I've never gotten a speeding ticket. And then the answer to the question is, well, how many times have you been pulled over? Well, the good news is most of the police are car nuts. So.
So wait a minute. So this is you talking your way out of a ticket?
I don't have to say anything. They like the cars I'm in.
Please tell me they come up and they go, license registered. Mr. Ford, please go on your way.
No, they asked me a million questions about the vehicle. And like everybody else, why didn't you do this? Why did you do this? So it's fun.
Things that keep you up at night.
Oh boy. Well, other than 4 children, which I think would keep any parent up at night. It's just, particularly during the dark days of the financial crisis when, GM Chrysler went bankrupt and we were just hanging on. I would stare at the ceiling every night saying, is this all going to go down on my watch? Am I going to be the one after 100 years that ruined the family company? And I worry about that every night. I do. I mean, I like where we are. We're very profitable. Things are going well, but there's no shortage of things to worry about, and I suppose there never will be.
I suppose there never will be. Well, there is much more to all of these conversations. Many of them last about 30 minutes, so make sure you find them streaming on Local 4+. All right, we have more for you just ahead.
There's a poem for everyone. I tell it, even the most reluctant poetry reader, give me a minute, I can find a poem for you.
The Art of Verse with Michigan's Poet Laureate Nandy Comer. And then,
When you came out and you spoke 2 days after the shooting, you seemed to be the person that people wanted to hear from.
That's a privilege. When you say that, that hits home.
the coach and the father figure, Michigan State's Tom Izzo. That's when A Conversation With comes right back.